So what you can do here is you can actually grab that endpoint and you can shift select that and use the pierce relation. Alright, so you see there it pops up an error, but instead you can grab that endpoint and do coincident, and it'll pull them together. And do the same thing down here, grab those two endpoints, and because these are defined intersections of these edges, it'll fully define this. And now what that allows us to do is use this extruded surface and create a helper surface there. And we'll just create a filled surface like we did with the other. And add that tangent relation. Now for whatever reason, it is not liking this. So this is a good opportunity to figure out why. Let's try something a little different. Alright, well that seemed to work. There's probably something funny going on down here in this corner. Let's see. No. Well, I'm going to go ahead and keep that boundary surface. I'm going to knit these three together, see what happens. Alright, so I went ahead and it just healed that up for us. Alright, so that's okay though. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to apply fillets to these edges. I'm not going to be concerned with the radius of curvature going across these pieces. In reality, these pieces would be added on afterwards. So actually back in that knit, I'm going to go ahead and add this in as well and let it heal whatever gaps there are there. Alright, I'm going to save it real quick and I'm going to go into fillet and just see what happens here. Alright, remember these things are pretty big, so 10mm fillet's pretty small. Alright, 50mm fillet doesn't look too bad there. Let's see about this over here. Alright, it's not liking that, so we'll leave the first one as a 50mm and we'll come back in here and play around with this, see what we get. I'm going to throw a 10mm on that edge, and then I'm going to make this one 25 and just let it blend it how it wants to across that. Yeah, I think that'll work just fine for what we're doing here. Okay. Go ahead and save that. Alright, so let's look at this thing from the side again. So we've added those two extra features on there. I didn't rename that helper surface. I'm going to go ahead and take care of that real quick. Alright, so now let's see what we want to do. On the right plane, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to fill that back in as well. This procedure should be fairly familiar by now. Alright, we don't really need to add any relations because everything back here is planar. We're not dealing with any curvature. So really I don't need that extra helper surface. I could just use that sketch edge. But just because it's a good practice, I'm going to go ahead and keep using them. Alright, and the reason I did this is for our propeller and the back end of this thing, I'm just going to go ahead and add it later. That way we can just seal this model off here and worry about those features afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and trim some of these wings up as well. So these back wings, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to fillet their intersections here. So we're going to trim those. And what I want to do is mutual trim. I'm going to use this bottom surface and this one here. And then for remove selections, I'm going to remove that piece and this inside piece here. And one thing that happens when you do that is these two pieces will actually get knitted together. So if we came in here and went to surface trim, you see it selects this bottom piece here and this extra little extrusion that we added. So that's something to keep in mind. If you don't want these pieces to be knitted together, then you do not want to use the mutual trim option. Alright, so for this one, I'm going to go ahead and use a standard type. I'm going to make this bottom my trim surface, and I'm going to remove this inside piece here. And OK that. And then for this again, I'm going to use the wing as my trim tool. I'm going to remove the inside piece here. So we have these two pieces are still separate. You can see when we select surface trim, the body in our surfaces folder, you can see we get this bottom piece is its own surface, and the tail wing here is still its own surface. Alright, let's go ahead and do the same thing for this up here. I'm going to use that as my trim tool and remove these two inside pieces. If you remember, these two pieces of the wings are still separate. Go ahead and do that again. Now, one thing that happens here is, since these two pieces are separate, it's not actually trimming how we want to. So that could potentially be a problem. Alright, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is knit the wing together now. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply a fillet to this front edge. And I'm not going to quite make it 25. Let's make it 15. OK that. And on this back edge, it's going to be even smaller. Let's make it a 5mm fillet. I'm going to OK that. And since we're already here, I'm going to go ahead and just fillet the end of the wing too as 5mm. The reason I did those as separate operations is really I would name these something like, you know, wing back edge fillet. Let's just go ahead and name that. That way later, if I wanted this to be more than 5mm, but I didn't want the end of the wing fillet to be any more, then I wouldn't have to split those up later. And really, I'm probably not going to come back and change any of this stuff, but keeping that as an available option later in the model is definitely something to consider. Alright, so now all this is one surface. I can come back in here. My trim tool is that wing, and I want to remove this section here. Hit OK. Alright, now you can see it trimmed it away with the fillet edges, and if we were to trim it before we did those fillets and came back later, that potentially would cause a problem. Now with this here, if I came back in and I added a fillet here, it's going to fillet that, but the trim is still going to have that sharp edge on it. One thing you can do is, if you knit all this stuff together and then apply your fillet, it will automatically fill that back in. And you don't have to worry about that. Since we're doing something a little bit different in the wing area here with this body seam, then I just have to be a little bit more careful about that. Going to put a 10mm fillet on the front of that. you can see out here all that's been